Welcome back to the Big Small Business Show. In studio with us today, we've got Rael Levitt. He's the founder and CEO of InnoSpace, but he wasn't always the founder and CEO of InnoSpace. Prior to that, he was the founder and CEO of Auction Alliance. And we heard in the previous segment how he built a massive empire and that came crashing down. So I just want to talk about now you've frozen, you've made the decision to close the business after starting that business, whilst you were at university. You built this business, and I can understand how we raise up on my heart.
Yes.
It's your identity,
yes.
Right? So you go from building something, not only is it commercial for you, but also it's a big part of your identity. What goes on in the months, and I remember even bumping into you at an airport after that happened, as you were trying to sort of rebuild yourself. What goes on in your mind to try and get ready for your second story?
Well, I mean, I could say it was a very quick story, but it wasn't actually. And so in the beginning, I was actually, truth be told, I went into quite a depressed state, and I was depressed, and I suddenly started, I went to therapy, and I had to sort of work it all through, because it was, there were just so many things going on. It was the sort of the loss of career, the loss of the sort of the status, and all of a sudden being a sort of villain character, because there was a villainous character. The media portrayed it like in that way, and because, as I said earlier, I wasn't actually speaking much, it so rolled, and so people thought that we live in a world today where people can say anything, especially with social media. I mean, this was a little while ago, but it already started, and people literally would say what they want. So, and that really shocked me. And so in the beginning, I really went in. I wasn't actually in sort of a very bad phase. And then I literally decided one day, look, I am the master of my own destiny, so I need to make some decisions. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should go left, I should go right. I was even confused in which country and city to live in. And while it all was going, the Auction Alliance story carried on for years, actually, because there were investigations into what happened. And so that made it very difficult, because in fact, at one stage, I wanted to go back into the auction business in the UK. I flew to the UK, and I got sort of fatherly advice from an auctioneer there. And he said, look, if you have had very bad publicity in South Africa today, everybody reads, it's all online. And, don't come to the UK and try and do the same thing here. You're not going to run away from that issue. So for me, a lot of it was sort of the resolution or resolving the negative media and eventually having a voice. And so I then decided to lie low. And so I completely got off the business radar. And I, after a while, I actually tried something new, which was in the tech space, and that was also a failure. So now it was even a worse issue for me, because it was, my big issue was I a one-hit wonder? And I always used to think that, because I'd literally come out of university and gone straight into this sort of glittering career. And now it ended in a sort of a dramatic fashion, public failure. And then I tried something else, and that failed too. And so now I got into the mode as like, am I actually now sort of, I'm 2 for 1? So is it like, am I a failure? Is this what has happened? And would I ever be able to sort of resurrect a career? And so what I actually did was I went to study. So I went back to university, and I had been at university in my early years, and I'd done sort of an undergraduate, and I went to do an MBA overseas, and really just to get into a completely new environment. And so I luckily got accepted to study in America, in California, in UCLA, and I arrived after being this sort of very well-known entrepreneur, in many ways quite a celebrated figure in my industry, to being a student with a backpack on my shoulder, walking into a class with a whole bunch of foreigners who didn't actually know my story, didn't know the background. And so I went back to university, and then I started goal planning, not actually business goal planning. I said, okay, I want to run a marathon. I want to complete the degree. And then I did a subsequent degree. And so it became very much about creating goals, and non-business goals, more goals on things which I could control. So I could go back to university. I could go back and I did the New York Marathon. It was very symbolic for me to be running and to hitting those sort of goals. And so I achieved those multiple goals at that point. And I got off the business dance floor and really sort of didn't do much during that period. I mean, I did lots of things, but career-wise, I didn't do much during that period. And then I had to have like a deep, hard think of playing all these scenarios and whether I could get back into a different sort of business with the experience, with the reputational issue had been floating around, and where I would do it. And that really took me a long time. And particularly when I was in UCLA, and then I went to university in Singapore as well. It was in that moment as a student, so to speak, that I started planning, and I literally wrote myself a book. I saw a book one day, and it said, the caterpillar can convert into the butterfly, and that sort of gave me inspiration. And I wrote out a roadmap of what I want to achieve, what career I'd want to be doing, and to me, in many ways, I still use that roadmap which I'd created.
So now, how do you go from there now into the property space? Like, I get the fact in the auction space, there's a lot of property you auctioning, so you've got connections there. You come back to South Africa, you actually moved to Cape Town, if I understand correctly.
And I was always lived in Cape Town.
You always lived in Cape Town, okay. You see, I thought you were always here. That's
I was all over the show, but I did live in Cape Town.
All right, so now you have to get you in property. But and you come in to try and find a niche. So how do you choose that niche?
So what I think I've been good at is I always look at what's going on in the world and what are the trends, and I do that in the auction business as well. So while I was studying, I thought, look, what is going on in the world today? And I'd been in auctioneering, which is really sales. I mean, we'd done a lot of property, so I had a knowledge of property, obviously, and I'd been doing it for such a long time. And the one big thing was we were in this technology revolution, which we still in. In fact, the revolution is just going faster and faster with all the new things which are coming out today, like AI. But at that point, I said, look, how is real estate being disrupted by technology? So it was quite theoretical, actually, in the beginning. And I said, look, how's it going to be disrupted? And it's going to be simply disrupted that, on retail, you're going to have online retail. People don't actually necessarily need to go into shopping centers to go buy goods. Offices, literally, our cell phones became our offices. And so you could go into coffee shops. And, COVID showed us that we didn't need offices. And then I looked at, there was one segment of the market which I knew nothing about, and I thought warehousing. That's interesting, industrial, because physical goods need to go somewhere, and the more goods are being delivered to consumers directly to their homes or to their businesses, the more there'll be demand for warehouses. And so one day I went for a run. And running became like an analogy for me as goal setting. And I ran along the sort of Table Mountain Road in Cape Town, and I was with one of the people I knew who had been in business with me, had actually worked at one of the banks. And I looked over the city and I said to him, tell me, those industrial properties, what do they go for? And he said to me, look, at that stage, he said, look, those things go for 3,000 Rand. And then I pointed to a big office.
A square meter.
A square meter.
Yeah.
And then I said rental. He said, well, it's probably about 50 Rand a square meter. And then he pointed to this, I pointed to the city, and I said, and there, these big sort of glimmering office blocks, shiny office blocks. He said, well, that's a 30,000 Rand a square meter. And I said, and the rental, he said, that's probably about 100 Rand a square meter. And so I looked at it and I thought, well, this is interesting. The one is probably a very high demand product. It's not sexy. The other one is, is a sexy office block. And I went like, that looks like a very interesting sector. And then I immersed myself in trying to understand as much about industrial property and warehousing as possible. And it just so happened that, and you remember, at this point, it was going to be very difficult for me to raise funds because banks look at people in terms of reputational risk. And look, one of the decisions I made in shutting down Auction Alliance was that I never liquidated the company. It was a very conscious decision of mine. I could have liquidated it, and I was even actually advised to, go into business rescue or to liquidate it, but I refused to. So I settled every single creditor 100 cents in the rand, and because I wanted to come back and fight another day. And so I found I had people who had worked for me in the past, and I sort of spread the word around that I'm looking to get into the industrial property sector. And one of the people who had worked for me came to me one day and he showed me this old grubby building in Epping Industria. And so I bought it, but I didn't have any money, so I needed cash. And I went to one of the banks, and because it was such a good deal, they agreed to finance me.
Let's take a break there.
Yes.
Okay, and then I want to hear from that finance how we become the empire that Rael Levitt has built right now in the form of InnerSpace.